All right. Hello and welcome everybody to the fourth shift, Mind, Body,
and Badge.
All right. Your host Luke and
Joe.
And Joe, what do we have in store for him today?
We have a really good episode today. We have a Billy Rose who worked from Menard, if I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, a correctional officer who wants to share his story with staff and talk about what he went through when it came to his staff assault. So, again, we're getting that frontline staff, retired staff, veteran staff that's going to come talk to us young cats or some old cats at times. And
I haven't had my birthday yet. I got a few more days here.
When's
Friday.
your birthday? Friday. You doing anything special?
Well, we already did. So,
oh, yeah.
I got a little early surprise party. We went to Red Rocks, which was my number one bucket list concert. Right, yeah. Never thought it would happen, or at least not for a while. You got kids arranging all that stuff.
Yeah.
Wife took care of everything. Even two of my best friends came there too. That we always go to the same concerts with. So it's like we were there. I didn't know they were coming. I was like texting them, "Oh man, you should really be here. This is so cool. I wish you." And then like an hour later, they showed up. So really cool, amazing show. Stayed in Golden, Colorado, home of Coors. You could see it right from our window. All kinds of little brewery shops, eateries. So much to do. They had this awesome river that runs through town that people like kayak and swim in.
Yeah.
Campground. I mean, just hills.
Let's take a moment here.
Oh.
Let's take a moment. Don't look at. I know. So we have us up in the screen right here, so we can keep track. But we also have to look that way because that's the camera, right?
Yeah. But so the get up. Right, you've got a.
I got my hat.
So we've got a few pieces of swag, right?
We've talked about it throughout the episodes, right?
So probably our collective favorite show is what?
Yes. Ted Lasso.
Huge Ted Lasso.
Huge. It's amazing.
I've always been a Jason Sudeikis fan too. So
absolutely.
I like most of what he would do. So So I got the Ted Lasso get up. We got the whistle.
AFC shirt, Richmond.
Got the shoes.
Yeah.
Diamond Dogs mount up.
Yeah.
So it's one of our favorite shows, probably because it does talk a lot about mental health.
Yes.
It talks about depression, panic attacks, suicide, substance abuse, but really just a great feel good comedy. A lot to learn, just really well done. So we thought we'd rep the Coach Beard and Ted today.
Coach Beard has a smaller beard. So,
but enough about us. Let's kick it over to our guest, Billy Rose. So, Billy, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, tell our guest kind of where you come from and where you've been.
Okay. Well, first of all, happy birthday, Luke. I've worked at Pontiac when I first started back in '95. So that's where I started, and it was pretty bad when I got there, and I almost quit because it was that bad. Well, I had a lot of staff that were stabbed. We've had a controlled riot up there. We had an incident where we shot and an inmate had passed away, and so there was a lot of things going on up there, and it was pretty rough. Then I decided to transfer down to Menard. And then I started there or came down as an officer. And then I think it was around June 29th of 2011, I was working in the library. And that's where the incident took place. But I'll go ahead and get to that in a second.
So you spent time at two of our highest security facilities in Illinois, and in two totally different parts of the state, no less.
Yes, that's correct, and both of them were different environments. You figure at Pontiac you have a combination of officers that come from Central Illinois, Northern Illinois, and Southern Illinois. Menard was predominantly people from Southern Illinois, so it was more diverse up there. But anyways,
yeah, you've seen the maps of Illinois where they'll have like Wisconsin, Chicago, Central Illinois, Southern Illinois, then Kentucky. So very, very different culturally. Yeah, like you said. And I bet there's probably a lot of experiences we won't talk about on air, but maybe we'll get a couple more stories today.
How long were you at Pontiac, Billy?
Was at Pontiac for almost 3 years. When I was there during the period where we took back the prisons and the curtains come down, the new search procedures. I was there during a controlled riot when they took over all of segregation and tore it up, went through the walls. We was doing cell extractions from midnight till 7 in the morning, waiting for the rest of the state to come in and help us out. So this was during the Richard Speck time. The Richard Speck takes come out and all that stuff. So it was yes. And you know when the inmate that was shot up there at Pontiac, we had a standoff on the gallery. So it took us almost 4 hours to lock that, or maybe 6 or 7 hours to lock that down after that incident. So that was a pretty hectic situation too, which also can cause post-traumatic stress. A lot of people on the outside didn't know what went on the inside. So, so one of those things, you tell people what goes on, they're like, really? They actually think it is.
My question to you, Billy. You said you were there for about 3 years. For those 3 years, you dealt with a lot already. So I guess my question is were you aware of your mental health then when it came to talking about it? Like, how did you handle and cope with everything you faced in the 90s, right? In that time, because it was a different generation working.
Yeah.
And just with the different corrections, the different environment, than kind of what it is now. How did you handle that?
Well, I'm a religious person, so I rely on faith. And you know, anytime I'm even with problems outside the prison, when things are getting rough, I always ask that famous question, WWJD, what would Jesus do? That always seems to help me out. But anyways, I am from Southern Illinois. That's why I come back down this way. And if you want me to go ahead and start on what happened that day at Menard.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd love to.
Well, I was the library officer, and in that library they had a solid door entrance. There was no windows, and they had an office in the back where the librarian lady worked. And apparently, an inmate was trying to do something he wasn't supposed to do. The librarian caught it and wanted that inmate to go back to the cell house. So I brought him up to the front, and I said, you know, it's not that serious. And I said, stay right here. I called the sergeant who was out somewhere, and I told him to 25 the library, or to meet me at the library, for those who don't understand what that means. Anyways, he had come up to me and said, hey, I need to get my stuff at the desk. But he said it in a little bit more worse terms. And I said, yeah. I said, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and get your stuff. Well, then I guess you could say he was testing my patience, and he was sitting there and talking to the inmates. So I started to follow him on that one side, and he jetted across to another table, and I just followed right by him. And I said, hey, I need you to come to the front. And next thing you know, I won't say lights were out, but I ended up getting tunnel vision. I got hit, and from there it was pretty much chaos. All I could say is, you know, I was telling him, I said, hey, it's not that serious. I had my hands up, but I just couldn't see. And I just kept getting hit. It got to the point where he grabbed my head and pulled my head down and kneed me in the face. And then I went onto the ground, and I still tried to say, hey, it's not that serious. And at that time, you're not really thinking about the radio. You're trying to protect yourself, but you're a little bit confused. So when he was on top of me and he kept hitting, I think one of the inmates went and told the librarian, "You better hit your button." So I got to the point that I was getting hit so much that I rolled over on my stomach, and then you start to think, I need to get help. So I reached down to hit my orange button on my radio, and my radio had been ripped off. And then I thought, oh my God, this is not good. I didn't know if anybody was coming, and so I kept saying to myself, I gotta scream, because that's all I got. So I didn't know that she had hit her button, and I was just screaming for help, and I could hear the lock on the door, and I lifted my head out of the pool of blood, and I actually seen my radio, and even though I knew they were coming, I reached for that radio and hit that orange button, and then I collapsed. Next thing I remember is a nurse on the ground saying, "Don't move," and a lieutenant down there. I don't remember the guy being tackled off of me. I don't remember chemical agents being sprayed. I really don't know how many inmates were involved. I assume it was just the one, but I couldn't tell you because I couldn't see, and I was getting hit quite a bit. I ended up having to get some disc in my neck replaced. I had a hole through my lip, a partially dislocated jaw, and a minor fracture on my cheek. But that I did have nightmares after that. But in my nightmares, I was getting stabbed, and you hear that they found a bunch of weapons afterwards. You're like, I'm lucky. So, in that moment, you when you get home from an incident like that, your mind's not right where it needs to be. The doctor, I had to go to a psychotherapist, and but she said it's like a funnel, and that everything's coming in at once, but your brain can only take so much to process. And so I would go to do something and forget what I was supposed to be doing. I was pacing back and forth. I had people stopping by the house all the time. And on top of all this, you're trying to get your medical stuff done, and you guys know as well as me that, dealing with insurance and workman's comp can be pretty hectic. And then you got people coming over here to do interviews with you.
Yeah, you've got to be in really great shape mentally to be able to handle and navigate all those waters. Yeah. So in the moment of a medical and mental health crisis, it's got to be almost impossible.
And, the way I handled it, you asked that question, Joe, is I went to a local park and I started walking, and of course I went to the psychotherapist, and I took my Bible with me and I opened it up, and there was a scripture in there that basically says, let God take care of it. Forgive that person, and it'll reap hot coals on him. He'll feel it. I had to realize that he doesn't have to answer to me. He has to answer to the higher power. And so that's my go-to is the Bible and Scripture. And that Sunday I went in front of the church and I said, I forgive that inmate. What can you do? It's just one of those things, and I'll let God take care of it. I felt a little weird saying that in front of the church because I do have other correctional officers that go there. I thought, why is he asking, why is he forgiving this guy? But that was part of my healing process, and being a Christian, that's what I'm supposed to do.
Well, before I guess, peg you with a bunch of questions, I want to just kind of take a moment and say thank you for sharing that story, because no doubt, you've done a lot of hard work to kind of integrate it in your life and stay healthy and get past all that, but not an easy story to tell, not an easy thing to relive. So, Billy, I want to thank you for just having the courage to come on here, tell us and hopefully our listeners and folks who are watching, realize how much courage you had, and maybe it will kind of help someone else come out of the woodwork who needed that help too.
I always tell the young officers, don't provoke these inmates, because you don't know who's going to get the brunt of an assault. And we're not there to punish these guys. We're there for safety and security, and that's it.
The amazing thing that sticks out to me, and it's hard to say there's one thing because there's a lot in there. Just you talked about faith, but I would say not just your faith in God, but your faith in humanity.
Yeah.
Wasn't rattled all that much, or at least you found a way to repair that, through the various things you did to get well. So still kind of believing things are good, people's good. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's how you experienced it at the time, but that's kind of how it feels as a listener to your story. I wonder if you could talk about that faith in humanity in that process.
Okay. Inmates, when they come in, when you talk to an inmate or you're giving an order, you've got to understand where they come from. If I told an inmate to take that damn curtain down in that tone, he's going to react how he knows how to react from the streets. So if you said that up in Chicago, you probably get shot or beat half to death. So you got to understand who you're talking to and where they come from, and different people or even different ethnicities deal with things differently. When you talk to someone from Southeast Asia, you got to put their hand on their back when you talk to them. If you're talking to Hispanic, you got to step back a little bit. So how you approach different people can change a whole lot. We call it verbal judo.
Which we, unfortunately, sometime after you, we took most of our folks through that. That's more of a standard part of the curriculum, I believe, because that is your best and your first weapon, your first line of defense. And you're right that there's these intersecting identities with culture, race, religion, ethnicity, personal experiences that make up a person, and we're not always aware of that. So, it sounded like even on that day, you did a lot to try to de-escalate and kind of bring the tone down.
Yeah.
So, who knows, had you kind of come in with fire, how much worse that could have been, and getting other people involved and things like that. So, even though there was a bad outcome, I think your ability to de-escalate probably, maybe that librarian is safe now because of you and some other things.
And what I want to point out is my character and how I am, inmates see that. And when they were doing interviews, a lot of inmates were crying because they knew how good of a person I was. And it really made them upset. It upset a lot of inmates that it happened. So they all sided with me, and that was pretty much a slam dunk case. Uh,
I guess a question I have for you, Billy, is how long did it take you to heal mentally and get over those nightmares? And a follow up after that. At what point did you realize you needed to go and seek help if you went and sought help?
well, I went and sought help. I went to my primary care physician first, and my lawyer at the time said, "Hey, I think you need to go see a therapist." And I started doing that, and actually I was doing more therapy for the therapist than for myself because of my faith. Of course, she wasn't a real religious person anyways, but there was a point, for a long time, you know, you're going to a lot of doctor's appointments, and they're always an hour away and 2 hours away, you know. And I was driving on the road, and I had to have someone with me because there's a couple times I wanted to end it. I actually wanted to just drive off the road, because you kept asking yourself, what did I do wrong? And a lot of things were going through your mind. And, you know, talking about suicide, um, I think being strong in faith kind of helped me in that area too.
Yeah,
So,
it's a huge protective factor.
and so that was that. Even though I'm a Christian, those thoughts still hit me. Um, just a lot of confusion, and so I think it took about uh, I say about 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, somewhere around there, for me to really get over it. There's sometimes when I talk about it, and it brings it back. And I did get angry one time when an inmate brought it up, but I had to step back and say, "Hey, I'm just going to just let it go." And when that incident happened, a lot of inmates talked to that other inmate and said, "Hey, we're not going there." So my character meant a lot to the inmates and how I handle it.
I think I think from what I'm gathering and what I'm putting together, and we actually haven't really done an episode on this in regards to spiritual wellness.
No, not. We've talked about how we wanted to
But
integrate spiritual wellness in some of our
and
upcoming
this
podcasts more.
and this is one of those episodes that
Yeah.
you took a tragic event, you took a horrifying event that could break a lot of people, a lot of staff, and your spiritual maturity at that time. You engulfed yourself. To me, is how this. I don't mean, unless I'm missing something, but it genuinely sounds like you have just engulfed yourself in your spiritual wellness when it comes to your faith and seeking help and taking the correct steps. And yeah, I know there might have been some missteps along the way. I mean, we always have that, but you have genuinely have taken this story. And you just mentioned that it's hard to reopen that Band-Aid,
Yeah.
By talking about it. And that's one thing that we find valuable interviewing people like you and talking about things like this because, yes, it's I think we kind of talked about it a little bit before as well. It's emotionally draining to tell a story of something we might have struggled with or what we've been through. And it's also like ripping off that Band-Aid, but when we do it,
There's some catharsis, right? It's sort
yeah,
of like letting a wound open up and breathe a little bit, even though it hurts to do that,
yeah.
for sure. Back to the spirituality part, people say this thing, leap of faith, or it kind of was like this bridge, it seems like, for you when the healing hadn't started all the way, things were dark, knowing that, hey, maybe I'm not there yet, but because of my faith, I know that I'll get there, right? If I put these other things in place and kind of attack my wellness from, multiple angles, this moment doesn't have to define me. Is that
Yeah.
fair to say, Billy, or would you say it differently?
That is true. You're hitting it right on the button. And I also wanted to, people that listen to this it doesn't hurt to talk. I actually got a phone call that someone heard that I served in the military with. He is, one of them elite soldiers. He's Special Forces, First Sergeant. He had a lot of friends die. He's a Bronze Star recipient. And he's been in probably, I don't know how many combat tours, not just there, but Gulf War in the different areas of theater of operations. And he called me and said, "Hey, I talked to a therapist and there's nothing wrong with it."
Wow, talk about knocking down a door.
Yeah.
Because, Billy, some of the work I do outside of corrections, I see a lot of VA clients for like disability claims and therapy, working a lot with PTSD. I mean, there's other conditions too, but demystifying that process. I mean, he's kind of what we'd say is the hyper masculine. He's the action hero, so to speak. And for a guy like that, a good friend and a confidant to help kind of open the door for you, that's pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he is a superhero, and I thank him for his service. But yeah, he did open the door and say, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with it." And I think he even has public service announcements for PTSD and or PTSD. So yeah, a lot of things opened up the door, like you said, a lot of the spiritual part of it, and having people there around you. You have to talk about it when it's your time. You are going to, you're going to be going into crowds, and you're going to sit in a different area. You're going to sit with your back towards the wall. You won't want to be around large crowds. So those things are going to happen.
Yeah, that's kind of telltale for police, military, corrections. You can kind of point those guys out because of the time they go to dinner, if they have to, if they can't avoid it, where they're sitting, how they're kind of hyper vigilant. So maybe that's a good part, because you're kind of doing your own PSA here, like your friend from Special Forces. So you're no less of a superhero, but maybe it's a good time to talk about kind of what are those symptoms of PTSD. So I know one of the big things you talked about was the nightmares that seem to be happen pretty quickly after the fact. And then kind of what you're talking about there, like in public, would be what we call hypervigilance. You sit in a spot where you can scan and check everything out, and it's sort of hard to relax, and you're always sort of reading the environment. What else, different from your baseline, at least maybe even different from before corrections, did you see kind of change, until that got better in those 6 to 9 months where you said you kind of made a turn?
Like I said, you're going to have thoughts of self-harm. That's going to be a symptom. You're going to have confusion.
Okay.
You're gonna do things and forget what you are going to do. Over time, the actual nightmares will. I say that nightmares last around 3 to 6 months, and those where I actually got up out of bed and I jumped and I was sweating. I mean, I was being killed in my dreams. And you try to be strong for your kids. I got 2 daughters, and I want people to know that it's tough on the family.
For sure.
How did you handle that with your family? Did you talk to your spouse about it? Did you talk to your kids about it now, or how did you handle it then?
I think it's good to take your wife and your child to the therapist with you on the first couple of visits, and so they can express themselves too, what they're going through, because they're going through their own emotions, because they get a call saying you need to get to the hospital, and she asks what for, and they says, "We can't tell you, you just need to get here." That's pretty scary for a wife. So
Yeah, and how old were your girls at the time?
2011. I think the one was 9 or 10. I think. but the other one wasn't born yet. So she only gets to hear about what happened. You know, she may see pictures of what happened, but that's
Sure, but certainly a 9 and 10-year-old being able to make sense out of that too.
Yeah.
So that what you're talking about there, our first criteria, PTSD. Yes, it could be you having that event happen to you where your life is threatened, you sustained an injury, or you witness it firsthand. But also for criteria for PTSD is learning about kind of that firsthand acquaintance, seeing it, experiencing it. So families can have PTSD from these experiences too, and it all kind of shakes out differently. I've never really seen two cases of PTSD that are exactly the same, right? They're all kind of speckled differently. So for you, you talked about, again, the nightmares, confusion, kind of difficulty focusing, some memory stuff, thoughts of self-harm, any panic attacks or kind of anxiety attacks?
Oh yes, I'm still on the medicine. Uh, I I take something for my anxiety, so that kind of helped out. And you know, I asked the doctor. I said, I think I'm well enough to get off of it, and he says, not until you retire. So
Wow.
Probably good advice. No reason if something's working to get rid of it. So beyond panic attacks, we'll go through some of the other stuff. Any flashbacks for you, like kind of in the middle of the day where you sort of lose track of time when you're back in that moment?
no, those have subsided. The only time that
Or
I
kind of earlier on, maybe in that first 6 months?
well, I also have it when I hear an assault happening. So you start thinking about what happened to you, and you're hoping the best for that person who just got assaulted. Because I live no more than 2 minutes away from the prison, so I don't ever like hearing an assault happen. And you know,
No doubt. So another one of the symptoms is having kind of real or imagined things sort of trigger your own symptoms again. So whether it's hearing about an assault, seeing something, certain types of accidents or violence. So it sounds like some of those, at different times have kind of heightened your own symptoms again. And,
yes,
and it sounds like your memory of the event is still pretty good for what you were kind of conscious for, which sometimes that can be, you sort of have a heightened memory or you're forgetting a lot of it with PTSD.
and believe it or not, this actually happened after I got out of security. I went into supply, and one of my inmate workers' daughter, I think it was his daughter, was a security guard at a jail, and she was assaulted severely. And he would ask me, "Hey, how can I help her deal with this?" And so I gave him, some of the same things that I had to go through, and he related to his daughter, and you know, so it's, the inmates respected me for how I handled it, and so, um, I've had other things that have happened since then. I was diagnosed with cancer about a year and a half ago, and some reason I ended up not having cancer. I had surgery, but I didn't even have cancer, so I attribute that to God too.
Yeah, you've had some experiences that we'll just say science can't fully explain.
It bamboozled the doctors. Hey, I had 3 MRIs. I gave my body to science, and even the doctor at Barnes, he was like, I don't understand. So, uh, but you know what? I would walk down the street in the prison, and all the officers would be kind of afraid to talk to you because they know that you were diagnosed with this. And they was like, "How are you handling this? You seem to be pretty chipper." I said, "Well, I know where I'm going."
Good point. And there's that faith again, right? Like I got to jump this gap, but I've got sort of wind in my sails to make that jump. And whatever that next landing spot is, I'll have the tools to handle it.
I have one more question for you, and again, I want to thank you that you're here talking with us and sharing your story. What would be, and you can have this as an open. This kind of be our closing, but like, if you would talk to the correctional staff now, right, the generation that's in right now working behind the walls, what would the biggest piece of advice you would give to them now, based on what you've been through, what you've seen, your staff assault, and just corrections in general? When it comes to families and kids and spouses, all that combined in this loaded question, obviously.
And let me put a sub part of the question. So in seeking help, how can we help our folks right now who may be experiencing similar symptoms or maybe something totally different, jump that gap too and go see mental health professionals, talk to their spiritual advisors, whatever. So to Joe's part, just general advice and then specific advice. How do we get our folks plugged into the services they need that they may be fearful of going to get?
See, he's good at breaking it down.
It's teamwork.
It's teamwork right here. I'm long-winded.
No, I ain't team,
breaks
baby.
It down.
I'm going to go with Luke's the question first is being able to talk to somebody. You need to talk. And you need to keep yourself busy. What they told me was to go for a walk, look at the nature, get your mind focused off that and focus it on something else. I went to the zoo, I went to the park, and I was with somebody, and we weren't talking about the incident. We were just having a good time. So you just focus off the incident, but also seek help with your therapist. Getting to your question, Joe, is I taught, I get a lot of respect from some of the officers when I was a sergeant on how I would train them. They're like, you're the only sergeant that does this, because I've seen a lot of things. I had a sergeant stabbed right next to me on the gallery. I've seen a lot of things through my career, so I would take them up on the gallery. And I would take them up to an inmate, and I said, I asked the inmate, if I did this to you, how would you respond? And he would tell me, and I said, see, this is how he's going to respond. But I said, if you just go up and ask him to take it down nicely and just walk away, 9 out of 10, he's going to take it down. So, de-escalate problems. That's the biggest thing. Don't have the chip on your shoulder. Don't think because you got a badge that you're Mr. Tough Guy. Okay? If you can keep to the main part, which is safety and security, follow the rules. We're not there to beat these inmates. We're not there to drag them down the gallery. If a staff assault happens, a lot of the officers want to do that. But then you got to realize a lot of other inmates are going to see it.
Treating those guys with respect, even though a lot of people say, hey, maybe they're not worth it or they haven't earned it, but just giving everybody the respect, kind of the golden rule or the platinum rule as they call it now. That's what it sort of sounds like.
And I'm going to tell you this. If you're on a gallery and let's say you got 100 guys on a gallery, you're going to have I call it the 1-0 sore head, the butt head. Just deal with that one and not all the other ones. So, and follow the rules. And a lot of times, a lot of inmates say, hey, Officer Rose is pretty straight. And a lot of inmates that were giving me problems end up actually apologize and say, hey, I'm sorry, man. Because I try to treat them like a human.
Yeah, I think that's big. That respect, isn't something that's bestowed upon you with an ornamental badge or a certain uniform. It's sort of earned in how the integrity you have when you go through, your daily duties, how you treat other people. Those you're working with and those you're protecting, from each other, from themselves. So, yeah, very, very, very interesting that's the advice, but not surprising.
No, yeah.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And talking to other police officers and people over here, that same thing. Like they always say, the best weapon you have is between your two ears.
And I'm going to be telling you, it really falls on the supervisors. They need to teach these officers how to do it correctly.
I would agree. Being a good leader, we don't always have the right people in leadership in any job, any career field, right? The Peter principle of from The Office, you kind of rise one level above your competency, but if you're thrusting into one of those positions, taking it seriously and being a good role model, like you said, you brought that guy up to someone in custody and said, hey, if I do A, what are you going to do? It's not going to go well, right?
And you need to transform these. Before I go, you need to transform these inmates' minds where it's us against them. That's where a lot of problems will lie.
For sure. That's that's probably not a great way to go into work every day either, is it? With that kind of.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. We just got to break that stigma that it's them versus us and us against them. You're absolutely right on that.
Well, I think we got a lot of great information today. We can't thank you enough for telling the story. Being on the other side of the coffee table, so to speak, I see how hard it is for some people to open up. And it sounds like you've really done that with a lot of people because, if you help anybody, it's so great. And you've not, taken your experience and wasted it. You've really turned it into kind of the silver lining. So really, really thank you for making time for us today. So glad we got to meet you and everything. And for those who maybe are just listening and not watching or maybe hear about the episode, I can tell you just interacting with Billy a little bit, you get that sense of kind of deep spiritual faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kindness, empathy, being okay with imperfection, but still trying hard.
And just the forgiveness aspect of it too. I know we're wrapping up, but I just want to point out
that was amazing.
That is, I can only imagine after that type of staff assault, right? Not only spiritually are you mature and you've already developed your coping, but just that you said that Sunday after you went and said, I forgive dude.
Yeah.
Just like that. I personally don't think I could do that.
It was like spitting that bitter poison pill out, probably,
And very much what I've gathered from this interview and just talking to you, talk about the energy he puts off, Billy, it's just one of those things that, yes, the spiritual knowledge you have and the maturity you have and the experience you have, but just, the humanity and above the humanity, the aspect of forgiveness is huge. And that mindset alone, just you alone in that situation, that could help break that barrier of them versus us.
Absolutely.
That's it's just, for me, it's amazing. I'm really glad you got to join us today.
Inmates that heard about me doing that, it changed them.
Well, not all superheroes wear capes. Some have tan button-up shirts, Billy. At least I think it's tan. I'm about half colorblind on TV. It looks tan.
Actually, it's like a purplish color. It's an Ariat shirt.
I'm way off if that's purplish.
Oh, man. My computer's messed up. Amy's right. I need to get a new Mac computer or something.
I honestly, Billy, I thought you were in uniform for a minute. It was that kind of tan, like some of the polos.
Well,
no, it's just a different color. And I even got my lapel mic.
He was all ready for this.
He's ready
legit.
for this,
He's
man.
legit.
You got the lapel mic and everything.
Well, we may have to bring you back for another podcast.
I'll use that when I do my podcast.
Go in and plug your podcast. So
give us the information
where to
on
find
how we
it.
listen to
What's
you.
the name of it? Yeah.
Okay, well, I've actually stopped it, but I've got a lot of episodes on Chester. It's Chester FBC, and if you look on that on Facebook or online, you can get to the episodes. It's called Coffee with Bill.
Coffee with Bill on Chester FBC.
Yep.
Okay. Well, guys, check it out because you definitely need to hear more of Bill and his story. And I wish we could have you on longer, but maybe we'll get you back later.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the end of our shift.
4th shift, we're out.
All right, buddy. Thank you, Bill.